Welcome to the Customer Success from the Ground Up podcast with me, Mike Marshall, Customer Success Leader.
And me, Deborah Knight, founder of CS Consultancy Captive.
Each episode, we interview people that have set up customer success from the ground up at their companies.
And we try and have a lot of fun in the process.
We hope you enjoy the next episode. Hello, Deb. How are you doing?
Hey, Mike. Good to see you. How's your week going?
It's very good. It's a Thursday. It's a bit cold in London, but it's crisp, and I had a good journey in today. So the day's going well. Very excited to be on the latest episode of the Customer Success from the Ground Up program with yourself, Deb. How's your day going? Little Bird told me you've had a really bad lunch, which is always disappointing.
I'm working from home today, and I'm doing that quite a lot now. And I went into the kitchen. I was like all set before recording the podcast and get a nice lunch. And like literally, stale bread is about the only thing on offer. So I'm feeling a bit sad about my lunch options. And I'm jealous because, you know, one of the things I miss about coming into London or the Captive office is in Nottingham, and it's like a really nice lunch, like where you treat yourself. You probably go out and spend a stupid amount of money on some lunch.
I'm going to do that in a minute. That's literally what I'm going to do after this. So everyone's eating nice lunches in my office right now.
Don't send me any photos of your really nice lunch.
I might do that.
What's your lunch of choice when you're in the city?
Something called Farmer J's I tend to go to, which is, if anyone knows Farmer J's, it's not cheap, but it is quite nice and semi-healthy. So that's always a good thing.
Can't be bothered with the queues though. That's the one good thing at home, no queue.
But yeah, great to chat as always. We've got a very exciting guest today, Olivia House, and I'll hand over to her in a moment, who's the head of CS at Dynarisk, and very excited to hear all about Liv in a moment. And I'll ask Liv her opinion in a sec on our normal That Escalated Fast portion of our CS from the Ground Up program, where if you've heard our other episodes with our other interviewees, we trawl some customer success forums and find interesting, obscure, or sometimes funny scenarios that people have posted about customer success and try and give our opinions on them from our professional expertise. So, Deb, you found a great one today. This is from someone called Bright Elephant 9612. So I'm advertising this person. So great point today. Thank you, Bright Elephant 9612. I'll give the scenario. So I'm currently a senior manager in customer success at a large company. The problem is that I don't see a realistic path to director level role here in the next few years. Quite a common issue. I've received an offer to become a director of CS at a smaller competitor, where I'd be responsible for building out a new CS practice from scratch. The role comes with a meaningful pay rise, great work-life balance, and stronger benefits. Sounds good.
Oh, there's a catch already. I can already hear the catch.
There's always a catch. My dilemma, Bright Elephant 9612 says, is it worth giving up the larger brand name for a director title, more responsibility, and better compensation at a smaller but still substantial company? I'd appreciate any perspective from people who've made similar moves or evaluated similar trade-offs. So that's going from that big sort of 100 billion market cap, pretty huge company. They gave additional detail down to sort of 10 billion market cap, still pretty big, I would say. But obviously it is an interesting dilemma. So, Deb, I'll ask you first. So what are your thoughts on this one? Would you take it or would you not?
Well, the catch is usually where it says work-life balance in a earlier stage business is not the same as you might be used to in a more corporate business. I would argue. I might be wrong, but that's my experience. I think that, look, if you enjoy chaos and you enjoy getting your hands dirty, you will enjoy the role. But if you are expecting someone else to do something for you, you know, in a more established business, you're like, oh, we've got a data team for that. Right, you don't have a data team. Unlikely that you'll have a data team early stage. Oh, we've got an admin team for that. No, sorry, again, that's going to be your job.
That's a
Um,
no. That's a no.
I can
Yeah.
see Liv laughing here because she's in this world right now. Liv, how would you answer that question?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with you, Debs. I think if you're bored in the corporate job, maybe, and if you find that you're keen to pick up new skills and have a bit more day-to-day challenge, then I think jumping from the startup will definitely help fulfill those desires. But I think I talk to so many people and I hear so many stories of people who've gone from that corporate environment to a startup world and last about 3 months and then go
Yeah.
straight back
Yeah.
through the revolving
I
door.
tried the startup thing. Yeah, I tried the startup thing, and that's you hear that a lot.
Yeah.
I did it. I have made the switch and I love it. And I think that, I worked in quite a corporate world for 10 years and then I've switched and I've been in startups and scale ups for a long time now, 10 years. So it's just a very different pace. There's a lot less blue tape, but sometimes that in itself can be frustrating because you feel like you're making decisions before they've been properly thought through. Whereas, previously you might have gone through different rigor and stages and things. So I think the best advice is doing what this person's done and actually speaking to people who have got experience, but also writing down what your conditions for success are. So, when I interview people for early stage roles, I always talk about how do you work with ambiguity? What do you do when there's no
Mm.
process? How good are you at thinking through processes? How good are you at just kind of mucking in? And versus how do you actually, yeah, you don't have thinking time. So if you're working in a more corporate place and you've got a routine way of working, that's going to go out of the window. So how are you going to be with that? So it's not necessarily skills because skills are transferable. It's about conditions and context for success, and think about that before moving.
So that's a very good answer, Deb. And I would agree. And what you don't want, I think, is someone to join and go, "Oh, yeah, but when we at Microsoft we did it this way. Oh, we had a team for that at Microsoft," and it's like, well, you don't have that here. So it's like as long as they know that going into it. I think this person's example is actually 100 billion to 10 billion market cap, and that's
Right.
really
So it's not
big
really
corporate to scale up. And actually, like I've done the corporate to scale up move, and I found it really good actually because scale up normally there's a lot of process and there are lots of
um,
teams. It's
mm.
going all the way down to like proper startup. That's quite a jump, I feel. So and obviously we're part of this podcast is designed to help people through that journey for sure. When they're starting things early on, hence our amazing guest Olivia House. So Liv, love to hear more about you. I'm sure our listeners would as well. Great to hear a bit about you, your background, your experience, obviously, in early stage CS.
Yeah, it's really good to be here. Thanks for having me. Um, so my background, I mean, I've spent over a decade now, which makes me feel very old, working in scale-ups and startups. I'm currently on number 3 in terms of taking things from 0 to 1 in
Wow.
customer success. So I've kind of been through that journey a few times. And I was going to say, one of those things is that it's enormously fulfilling to kind of be able to join something and really like see it grow as well. If you can put up with the chaos and the lack of structure and everything through the way. I mean, I've worked in a few different industries, kind of jack of all trades, master of none, which is very helpful when you're taking things from 0 to 1. But kind of worked in employee benefits and engagement space, as well as in food, and most recently cybersecurity.
Oh, that's
Exciting
so brilliant.
space.
It is actually, isn't it? Yeah, it's a great one, and yeah, it's something obviously very varied experience, I think. But importantly, as you say, Liv, and definitely the reason we wanted you on the podcast is that your experience of sort of going from zero and doing that multiple times. I think that says a lot about you and your kind of sort of scrappiness. I'm sure is a business term for being able to kind of set things up early stage. So. Yeah, so for the main interview portion of our CS from the Ground Up podcast, I'll hand over to the wonderful Deborah Knight, and I'm sure she'll be easy on you initially, Liv, and then ask more challenging questions. But I'll hand
You
over.
didn't say this was an interview.
It's a podcast. It's a conversation. It's
Don't
nice.
worry,
It's a
don't worry.
conversation. It's a grilling. Did you not get that? No. Well, we'll start with our icebreaker that we like to do. And we've already touched on my disastrous lunch, but I hear that you're a bit of a foodie. And I would like to know, if you had a customer escalation, how would you appease them with food? Which we obviously don't do, but in a scenario that you're allowed to do that.
Oh, that's a really good question. Let me think about that.
It's okay, we're
How
live. Don't worry.
Donuts.
Take 10 minutes, it's fine.
Oh, I was going to say it depends on the customer, and depends how big the problem is. I was going to say if it's a real disaster, that's when you kind of like go cap in hand to the finance team and ask for something to kind of wine and dine them and try and damage control as much as possible.
There's a guy in our office actually who was going to meet his friend last night. I think he works for an AI company that's something's gone very wrong at ChatGPT or something along those lines. Anyway, I think he's buying some serious donut action at the moment for customers because sometimes it's needed with escalations. But yeah, well, so let's say a fairly bad one. Liv, what do you reckon? Are we talking steak, or are we going like
I don't know why, but I immediately go to wine rather than food.
That's a good shout, actually.
Right, okay, you've appeased me and I'm happy.
Something like a nice bottle of Chablis or something. Or if it's another startup, something which is a bit like fizzy and organic.
Very nice. Very nice. Right, so sorry for throwing that one out for you. But now we'll move on to the proper questions about customer success from the ground up. And you have recently started as the founding customer success member at Dynarisk. Do you want to just give us a bit of background about what's going on there?
Yeah, so I joined Dynarisk about 6 weeks ago. So I feel like I know what I'm talking about now, which is always good. It's a cybersecurity company. It's been around for 9 years, which is quite incredible that I'm the first customer success hire. They've got 4 different products and then a range of services and everything that they distribute to the market in a variety of ways. They've got a B2B product, they've got a B2B to C product, they've got a B2B to B2B to C product as well. So like a few different user cases, and like they kind of tend to use a distribution model as well. It's a really, really exciting time to work in cybersecurity. There's a huge amount of buzz around it at the moment. I think there's a huge amount of visibility as well. Like I think when you look at what happened with Marks and Spencers and kind of various other corporations and everything, like I think it's more and more on people's radar. And the products that we have are both for SME market, kind of via different insurance products, and also kind of for individuals as well. So yeah, I mean, a lot of what I've been doing has been finding out, okay, who am I managing through that complex tapestry of relationships and scenarios, and kind of figuring out the different links along the chain, who's involved at which point of time as well, because there's some which are pretty straightforward, and there are some, as I've described, which are pretty complex in terms of the chain. So yeah.
And I think that that sort of definition of who you're actually needing to be talking to and who's your customer base and where you're basically starting, it's probably a familiar story when you've been the 0 to 1 founding CSM in previous roles, would you say?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's so the 3 times that I've kind of done this journey, it's quite interesting because it's been at very different points of the company life cycle. So the first time that I've done it, I was employee. It was taking things 0 to 1, but we had 0 customers when I launched as well. I mean, we had a pipeline because we were launching a UK office, and they'd got a load of companies internationally that we could kind of open up with. So that was kind of like putting the structure in place, translating what worked internationally into a new market, kind of looking at what the resources and everything were, again, looking at slightly different user cases. The middle one, which was in the food industry, it had been established for a couple of years. So there was a team, there were some processes, there were some customers, but a lot less to untangle, for want of a better word, than something which has been going for 9 years and has got actually a couple of hundred potential kind of key customers and contacts, with very, very different user cases. So it's kind of like getting your head around everything, getting your head around, I mean, with anyone joining a new role, right? It's getting your head around what the products are that are being used and how those products are being used as well. And then you can start looking at, okay, what's the business case for them? What's the user case? How are we adding value? What do people love about this? Where is there room that we could kind of really come in and demonstrate value and add value back, internally and then externally as well?
I think it's a really interesting point, that whole idea that customer success being created at different points in an organization's maturity and life cycle. We always often assume that customer success is at that moving from that maturity stage of reactive to proactive, and that's when you introduce customer success. And the reality is, when I speak to different businesses and different people, that you can talk to some very mature businesses that, like you said, have never had a customer success function, and they want to behave differently now towards their customers, and they recognize the value of a customer success function. And it's, how do you introduce that? And so I think it's really interesting, that that's something that you are benchmarking against those 3 different times when you've done it.
Yeah, I think the other thing within that as well is, obviously, like if it's the company's been around for 9 years, those customers have not been kind of left in isolation and abandoned for 9 years. Those customers have been looked after and nurtured, by the different, either by the sales team. Actually, when I joined, I think there were about 5 or 6 different functions who were interacting with and looking after those customers.
Yeah.
Kind of across the way. I mean, multi-threading to the max, which is really good, but it means that so many people, like the CTO would be spending hours and hours on customer success calls, which is not an efficient use of, not necessarily like the best use of his time, given everything else that he's got on his plate. So,
Yeah,
um,
that makes sense. Okay, so you've started this new role. Where it sounds like you've got lots of touch points. Where do you start with data? Like, what are you looking at right now?
yeah, great question. So where do we start with data? Finding out where the data is to begin with. One of the
If it
things,
exists as well, I find sometimes like, oh, we don't capture that bit of data that
yeah,
you're asking for. Is
everything and where it is as well. I think, what are the systems that are in place already? Like, where's that data being captured and stored, and in what format? I we just migrated the CRM about 3 weeks before I joined the business, so it was the same question that everyone internally was asking as well, which was quite nice. So it wasn't just me trying to find out, okay, where's the data? Because everything was in the previous CRM and not all of it had made it over. So CRM is always a really good starting point. If you've got, like, again, it depends on how how far along and how kind of mature the startup or scale up is. What's kind of, gosh, I can't remember the word. I mean, we use a system called Metabase. Kind of like what data analysis tools are they using? Kind of what touch points are used in there? Do they integrate with the other data points that you're kind of looking at as well? What's the customer support system that you're using? What data's within there? How can we report from that? how can we tell the story and kind of link all of the different pieces together so it actually makes sense and you can kind of share it in a way that's really cohesive to customers and kind of to stakeholders as well.
And
And sorry.
did you sorry Deb, did you have like at the stage the company's at now, it's still reasonably small, but like not complete like from the beginning stage. Did you have sort of some data, enough data about like health scoring or the general health status of the accounts, or like adoption data or utilization data? Was there sort of enough of a history of that to give you like an idea about a correlation of that and retention, for example? Is that something you looked at or had?
Yes and no. Yes and no. So one of the first things that I've kind of been doing is step one, and this is the scrappy startup nature of taking things 0 to 1, is putting together a dashboard where I can pull all the different pieces of data in one piece. That's not going to be how we scale, but as first person with everything in different places, it's a good place to kind of pull things together and tell things visually and share things visually as well. Quite often the first thing that you'll be asked for, or kind of that I was asked for, is, okay, how do we know how healthy customers are? How can we see that information? What can we do to kind of tell that story? And kind of looking at where you're working with a range of products as well, like how do you keep that consistent across all of those different products and services. The answer to the question, we had some but not the full picture. So for example, for our support helpline and kind of the products which are linked with that, we had all those data and we had CSAT scores that we could share and use within our support tool, Freshdesk. And there's lots of similar ones like it. So we could tell a partial picture, but we didn't have that data for the other products. Some of those products we did have plugged in to the BI tool, which meant that we could look at some of the engagement and usage, but not all of the products. So again, it's kind of like fishing and kind of figuring out, and especially where customers are using several different products as well, how can you then, you don't want to tell a partial picture if you're sharing a CSAT for one thing and then not for another one. And kind of figuring out how that looks. Again, kind of building this dashboard, first port of call is, okay, what does customer success look like? What is a healthy account? And figuring out, within what's kind of been built already and what data points you have, okay, what are the common grounds between all of these? So kind of what I set up was a simple metric, analyzing, okay, what's the product adoption like? What's the customer support like? Do they feel supported? Do they feel like we're listening to them and kind of developing their products? What's the customer's financial health like? Are they happy with the way that we're billing them? Does it all make sense? Are they paying on time as well? That is something. Again, if you're in a really big organization, you might have bigger teams which are fleshed out and kind of accounts payable and across the finance team. When you're working for a really small company, that might fall under customer success. So
No, I think that's a really good point that you touched on there, which is, the customer health doesn't stop at how much they've engaged the product. It's also about how they engage with you as a business, as a brand. Whether whether they actually understand what their financial performance is, because you might be an early stage or a new CS function, but your customer might be quite large, and they might not even be aware of the fact that they haven't paid invoices on time, and that's actually quite an important factor for you. So having that overall health, and I remember I did something similar at a previous business. Actually, I talked about the housekeeping and caretaking piece of customer health, around those things like, can we get CSAT scores, and understand those? Can we understand, invoicing and all that, as well as payment terms? What's our health around those really kind of boring but essential housekeeping elements? And then you build up the kind of the value add, like customer outcomes, engagement, adoption, things like that on top. Is there anything you're like, why are we bothering looking at that?
Oh, um, yes, can be. And I think this is more the way that my mind is going with that question is um, in terms of the product development side of things. And I think this is somewhere where um, a big, gosh, I don't know if I'm going to get into trouble if I say this, like a
Don't
big,
get terrified.
a bigger, like, I mean, another core aspect of customer success. Like, I always think, okay, customer success manager, you're representing the needs of the customer internally within your organization. You're also representing the needs of your organization with the customer.
Mhm.
And I think, something that I found in roles is when you've been so used to saying yes to the customer, and actually some of what you have to do is come in and say no sometimes. You're not paying us for this additional development work. The team might have spent, the tech team might have spent 2 weeks worth of dev time building a product for something which is for a really kind of like niche user case that's not going to be scalable. It's not going to be necessarily used. It might not even be engaged with that much. And I think that can be tough as well if it's the first time that you're doing that, and it's the first time in an environment that you're making that challenge to the customer as well. Kind of
Yeah,
really
I'm
building out the value.
really glad you brought that up though, because I mean, I see that. I'm in it now as well, and I see that with clients as well. It's you do go from a stage where you've been trying to win customers, learn, find product market fit, and being responsive, um, and testing things. And then at some point that has to change. And that can be quite a difficult move because you have to start questioning, like, well, is this just one person that's asking for that? How do I gather data on the rest of the portfolio to see if it's relevant for their needs as well? And what's the true use case here? And that's another data point that it's hard to bring together.
Yeah, I think
Oh,
I would agree. I think even when I worked at like a corporate, I was in a kind of small part of it, and I remember we had that problem live of customers saying, "Oh, we really need. It's really critical that we have this feature just for us." And
Yeah.
then it is quite difficult when like you say, when you're used to being solving problems and trying to get a good experience for them, so they're effective with your tool. That's your goal. But like if no one else is going to use it, like that's 2 weeks of dev time. It's expensive. It's like there sometimes have to be a bit of a pushback and try to help the customer understand this maybe isn't something you can scale to other customers, and so sorry. So as you
sorry, or
say, that
pays a
can be
bill,
difficult.
and then they're
Yeah,
bored.
but yeah, make sure you pay us. Yeah, so it can be challenging.
Mhm.
And just one other question, Liv, before we start to wrap things up. But you mentioned that you have these different distribution channels and different territories. And do you see a difference in your customer base wanting or wanting different data or performing differently across your different territories, and how are you managing that, or how have you managed it in previous roles?
Yeah. So again, it kind of comes back to what that product mix is as well. And I think that's something you might need to navigate, again, depending on maturity of the company. But if you're kind of working with an audience which is kind of established in North America, for example, versus Europe versus APAC, even the ways of communication, firstly, like you might have loads of data points for some of those territories and absolutely zero data points for other ones, just because everything is word of mouth or WhatsApp or in person. So there isn't a paper trail. And it's, again, like figuring out how you prioritize across all of those. And
That's a
again,
good one, actually. Sorry to interrupt you, but like
mm,
you take for granted the fact that you're going to bring in your email comms into your CRM. But
yeah,
what do you do with? I had clients in Dubai who were only WhatsApping us. At that point, we didn't have a WhatsApp integration. So all of the stuff the team with sales team, CS team were doing it with customers in the UAE, we were like, got no visibility of it because didn't tie into the CRM. So it's a really good point. I did interrupt you though, so sorry about
don't worry, I can't remember
throwing
what I
you
was
off.
talking about now. We're talking about data points, weren't we?
Yes.
What are the different data points? Yeah, again, it's like another data point is, what's the industry, what's the user case? That's one that you need to kind of find an outline. And again, you'll find it might be very, very different in different territories. That's certainly something that I found. And then figuring out how you then approach those when uh, something has gone wrong, or you're not seeing the deliverables that you expect to. But you can't necessarily take the learnings from other territories over because it's kind of very different.
And what you're subtly sort of referencing here, which I really love, is that macro environmental factor and those data points that are happening externally in the market. If you've got a consumer type product and a market is, in a depression or in a lower performing state, then you're not going to get the same expenditure. And I think that we can sometimes get so focused on internal data that we forget to kind of take that outward lens and understand what are the other things that are factors that are driving performance as well. So I love that you mentioned that. Um,
Actually, the last thing I'd say on that is that it isn't just like communication of data. Like you think the bigger the company, the easier it is. It isn't always actually. Even
yeah,
in big companies, like if you've got loads of information in like EBR, QBR decks,
Yeah.
it's like, and you haven't got those sort of fields in your CRM, then it's like, how do you pull that from those resources into like a consumable mechanism in a CRM where you can report on it? So like, it isn't, even in bigger companies, I think that is quite challenging sometimes.
Yeah.
and there's such a thing as too much data, which is why one of the questions why I asked a minute ago, which is, is there anything you're thinking, why are we looking at this? And you talked about sort of the product feedback, but there is a moment in time where actually old data points become redundant to us, and especially when you've spent so much time in a reactive support way and we actually think those are no longer relevant. We shouldn't look at that type of data anymore. We need to change how we're looking at our data. And that's a educational piece internally to try and influence as well, which can be really hard.
Yeah. I think the other thing that it can be kind of talking about having too much data, it's what you're doing with that data and how you're translating it. So, something that I've been looking at is what's the MI? What are we providing customers? Like I said, some products we've got like not a huge amount, which is that accessible, and then some we've actually got tons of data points, and we're sharing these with the customers every kind of month. There might be kind of 20 different fields and numbers that we're sending over to them. What's the context of those numbers? Like, add a bit of the qualitative information. Why should they care about these numbers? What does it mean? What does it mean across time as well?
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. So, well, thank you. We've talked all the way through the different sort of life cycle stages when customer success can get introduced, and your experience of that being at 3 different points of a customer life cycle, sorry, a business life cycle. We've talked about trying to capture data, understand what data you've got access to, where it's stored, what systems is it in. Um, Understanding where you can understand what your health score is, and where you've got a partial view and maybe more of a view on one product than another product, depending on that product's maturity and the systems that product is supported by. And then I really loved how you called it step one and just simplifying the dashboard and just trying to bring it all into one place and have a clear overview. And you also used the word simple as well, and trying to keep it simple. And I think that's definitely one of the things you have to do at that point is just try to keep it simple and not get lost in all the data.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. It's been really interesting hearing all the points, and definitely we're a very professional podcast. So I obviously forgot to mention the fact that we're concentrating on data today at the start of our introduction. So just pretend we're at the start. I say, "Hey, welcome to Liv House. She will talk to us a bit about data in the customer success from the ground up world." So that was my preface that I forgot. So really appreciate your insight, Liv. That was I think very, very useful and important, I think, for everyone to understand that some of the points that were wrapped up by Deb, and obviously we'll I think that will benefit the listeners for sure, especially if they're going through sort of certain situations similar to what you've experienced in a few different environments. So great to meet you on today's session, Liv. I'm sure you're going to smash it and go from strength to strength at Dynarisk, and they're very lucky to have you. Thank you for your time, and we'll speak to everyone again soon on our next episode of the Customer Success from the Ground Up podcast. Thank you.
Thanks.
See you later.
Been a pleasure, guys.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Customer Success from the Ground Up podcast with me, Mike Marshall.
And me, Deborah Knight. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to like and follow, and we'll see you on the next one.